Thank you for coming to my recital. Today I would like to present on imagery in Lowell Liebermann's Opus 29, Gargoyles for piano, interval ratio generation through multitonal articulation. There are some changes in the title from the paper I submitted to committee because I and my academic supervisor, Professor Antocolette, decided on this more meaningful title. At this beginning of my presentation, we can see three important aspects in the title: imagery, interval ratio, generation, and multitonal articulations. Even though I will explain about those things later, I would like to give you basic three concepts of the presentation. As the title of Gargoyles, imagery is important thing in Liebermann's 4 Gargoyles because his musical construction is based on drawing. And the imagery is presented by interval ratio generation through multitonal articulations. Interval ratio generation means this music is not based on traditional tonal function, but on interval ratio. So instead of major or minor tonality, various intervals determine musical language in the Gargoyles. And this interval ratio generation appears through multitonal articulations. The term multitonal is different from polytonality. Polytonality is the musical use of more than one key simultaneously. However, multitonal articulations do not have any centered keys but appear through chords, melodies, phrases, or sections. So I think it is enough to talk about this title. Let's move on. The methodological approach in this study is to place compositional developments in the context of his life's work as composer. An analytical comparison between Liebermann's Gargoyles, Opus 29, and historical etudes by other composers will help understand important characteristics because this comparison can play a critical role among the pieces in the same stylistic genre, the etude. The Gargoyles are similar to etudes in concept, despite its use of various figurations, which are different from what is commonly called etude. But its technical delicacy, restlessness, and density of sonority have a point from which they can possibly be considered etudes. In this way, an analysis of the Gargoyles in structure, melody, harmony, and rhythm will discover the representative musical language of the American idiomatic pianism, which differs from the piano etudes of the past. Okay, next. Liebermann's experience as a composer and pianist is interconnected with his life. Liebermann was born in New York City in 1961, and his family was music-friendly. He started studying composition from the age of 15 with Ruth Schoenthal and completed his first piano sonata at that time. This premiered at the Carnegie Weill Recital Hall and trained at SUNY at Stony Brook with David Diamond. He continued at the Juilliard School for his master's and doctoral study and learned composition from Vincent Persichetti and piano from Jacob Leitiner during this time. During his graduate study, he found that his musical style did not fit that of David Diamond. So after 7 years under Mr. Diamond, he moved to Vincent Persichetti. Among them, Liebermann made efforts to find his own musical style as he struggled with his teachers. He had worked as a subconductor in Nassau Lyric Opera Company, and Liebermann has composed various commissioned works like the organ solo piece, choir's music, and a commission by a world well-known flutist James Galway helped him create his sonata for flute and piano in 1987, which has been recorded over 20 times. Mr. Liebermann has composed 2 long operas. He also received the Charles Ives Fellowship from the American Art Literature Association and was a winner of the Dalius International Composition Contest by War Songs in 1986. As pianist, Mr. Liebermann himself has written solo piano music. Liebermann was awarded the first American Composers Invitational Award by the 11th Van Cliburn competition in 2001. After the majority of finalists chose to perform his 3 impromptus, which were selected from works submitted by 42 contemporary composers. In an interview with newscaster Sam Donaldson, Van Cliburn described Mr. Liebermann as a wonderful pianist and fabulous composer. He composed his representative piano work, the Gargoyles, Opus 29, in 1989, recorded over 15 times today. He composed various works in many genres, such as symphonies, piccolo concerto, cello sonata, songs, and instrument music. Currently, he resides in Weehawken, New Jersey, and teaches composition in Mannes College. Directing the Mannes American Composers Ensemble, he is well known for compositionally superior craftsmanship, traditionalism, and audience performer appeal. Since Lowell Liebermann is an American contemporary, there are not many materials which fully define his compositional styles. Nevertheless, excerpts from an interview with Mr. Liebermann provide ideas of his musical influences, favorite composers, and musical language. His compositional tendencies have moved from atonality to tonality while studying. This means that his compositional style is not intimately related to 12 tones music or serialism, which is the broad trend of the 20th century. Although his work does not clearly accept functional tonality, he preferred to be considered a neo-tonalist or new tonalist. Critics considered him as a composer who follows traditional styles. However, from his desire to be called neo-tonalist, there can be a slight possibility that he would not follow classical and romantic traditions, such as formal structure, functional tonality, or lyricism. Also, there is another possibility that he would create a different sort of tonality, which he insists neo-tonality. He said that he has been willing to inherit the musical traditions from historical composers such as Bach, Beethoven, Bartók, Liszt, Busoni, Frank Martin, Fauré, and Shostakovich. On this composers list, most works are tonal centered, and their tonal senses could relate to his neo-tonality. He said that the most influential composer to him is Shostakovich, and this suggests that his musical language would be closer to a musical idiom of Shostakovich. Critics have said that Lowell Liebermann was much influenced by Prokofiev, but he partially denies it with this explanation that Shostakovich had composed piano works not so much like Prokofiev had done. Likewise, his musical language possibly has several tendencies adopted from Shostakovich, whose musical styles normally were such traits as coexistence of major and minor, heptatonal scale patterns, modal mixture, modal scales, linear orientation, and constant tonal shifts. These compositional styles would be an important criteria to study his works. Gargoyles was commissioned by the Cherenin Society and premiered on October 14, 1989 in the Alice Tully Hall by pianist Eric Hemy. The Gargoyles incorporates the featured 4 movements, which are technically challenging piano works. The title Gargoyles came from Liebermann. He mentioned in an interview that I actually had a lot of little plaster gargoyles. In fact, there are 3 of them in the bathroom. I thought it was a good title because the pieces had their grotesque side to them. They were little character pieces. It is evident that he tried to create the Gargoyles as a grotesque title for his commissioned 4 character pieces. Even though he did not refer to them as piano etudes, he said, "I was conscious that it was rather Lisztian. I wanted to write a big, bombastic showpiece. This can convey its concert etude-like characters, consisting of their compact lengths with technical challenges." From the Oxford English Dictionary interprets that Gargoyles is a grotesque spout representing some animal or human figure, protecting from the gutter of a building, especially in Gothic architecture. Also, the architectural origin of gargoyles are considered to frighten off and protect those that it guards, such as a church, from any evil or harmful spirits. As Liebermann searched for a grotesque title, the meaning of gargoyles suggested the fantastic and demonic images of the Gothic architectures, which relates to the impression of spouting rainwater. The first piece, Presto, describes passionate rhythms, sudden changes of dynamics, and turbulent feelings. Many triad chords appear angular motivic ideas in atonal throughout the piece. The second, Adagio semplice ma non molto rubato, is the only slow movement of the Gargoyles, which includes linear octave melodies in multitonal sense of repeatedly accompanying chords. The third movement, Allegro Moderato, strongly gives a viewpoint of Impressionism, reminding compositional styles of Debussy or Ravel. This movement looks the most etude-like piece in the Gargoyles because of its singular figure of the accompanying arpeggio. Also, its melodic lyricism and homophonic progression display romantic and classical traditions in compositional styles. The fourth movement, Presto Feroce, is the finale piece of the Gargoyles, which has a similarity to Tarantella's impending rhythm. The use of the wide range of keyboards proves its technical difficulty and wild nature of the last movement. So I put these Gargoyles pictures according to its characteristics of each movement. Before we get into the analytical explanation, there are some analytical terminology in this study. OCT, that is octatonic scale, and there are 3 types of scales. Octatonic 0 means the first whole step starts from C, which is number 0 of 12th tone. Likewise, octatonic 1 has the first whole step from C sharp. And octatonic 2 from D. Next. The first movement does not have any key signature due to the repeatedly appearing pitch A from the beginning to the end. It seems to give a tonal center through this movement. But it cannot be completely considered a functional tonal pitch. Rather, it can be considered a part of the gesture of the first motif, A, G sharp, F natural. Also, this 3 pitches motif consists of a segment of octatonic 0. So this is 3 motif, but this is a part of octatonic 0. Also, the three note motif, A, G sharp, F natural, has pitch relationship among them, consists of minor second and augmented second. Same with minor third. This stark motif recalls the opening of Ravel's Scarbo or Copland's piano variation. From measure 6, the first triadic chords start with the 8th note. F sharp, F, G sharp, C, F, which is F minor chord, F, G sharp, B, D, diminishes 7th chord, F, D, F, A, D minor chord. These progressions of the chords repeat periodically, but there is no tonal center. The chords pitches are listed under octatonic 0, like F, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C, D, D sharp. Likewise, Liebermann begins the first motivic idea A with triadic chords in octatonic 0 so that it sounds like multitonal passage. However, there actually is not in any specific tonality because any tonality is not anchored. This motif in octatonic 0 differently restates in measure 8 to 9 as itself from G sharp to E flat. Also, the fragment of the octatonic 0 shifts to the other octatonic 1. When the first octatonic scale moves to the next in measure 9, chromaticism appears. However, it does not seem real chromaticism because when two segments of octatonic scales meet, 3 pitches of the edges of the segments meet in half-step relationship. In measure 18, the second motivic idea B appears as similar as the motivic idea A, consisting of some triadic chords in octatonic 0. So it's similar. Theme C starts in measure 47 with combination of 2 diminished broken chordal pitches, E flat, A, F sharp, and G sharp, F natural, D triads seem to be in tonal sense. However, the pitch collections of the triads are in octatonic 0 at the same time. 2 broken chords of the diminished pitches occur the same as interval relationship of the 3 notes motif at the very beginning. Actual sounding melodic lines bring to ears A, G sharp, F natural, which is exactly the same with the pitches of the introduction motif. So the melodic line is focused on by a combination of octaves and single notes. Between C prime and A double prime, there are 2 types of transitions. And the first transition is in a different tonal context, unlike octatonic scales. This is because dissonances are added, because 3 triadic chords, E flat major, B minor, G major, are combined in measure 88. It's a square and B minor, bass, and next squares, G. So if I play together. So this seems to function the other multitonal sense over the octatonic sonority. This new sound plays a traditional role to coda. This piece is mostly restless, like the rest movements of the Gargoyles. which is a feature of etude. Angular eighth notes passages are predominant, mixing with polyrhythms such as 3-5, 6-7, and 6-10. In measure 8-9, motive A have 3-5 rhythm, which repeatedly appears throughout the section A of the piece. In measure 16-17, the octatonic scale of 6-7 and 6-10 rhythm ascends toward the motive B. This 6-10 rhythm seems to be used as a sense of speeding up. Liebermann generally borrowed Hemiola rhythm throughout all the four gargoyles and also placed the Hemiola rhythms at the first movement. In measure 10-11, the Hemiola rhythms make 3 stresses in 6/8 meter. In measure 46-47, the Hemiola rhythm focuses on the 3 notes motif. In measure 46, transposed pitches E flat, D, B comes, and measure 47, A flat, F are the exactly same notes with the very first 3 notes motif. So we can listen. Let's move to the second movement, the only slow movement. The second movement of the Gargoyles starts with the alternating thirds of C major and minor, and has linear octave melody, which seems to be in B major. This second phrase starts similar accompanying chords in E flat major and E minor, and melodic octaves move from C flat major and A major. The combinations of the interchanging thirds, including all the rest of the piece, are in octatonic scale. Multitonal phrases in A section have its own features. Interacting accompanying chords frequently make consonant and dissonance at the junction with the melody. In measure 1, starting melody G sharp meets E minor chord, so it makes a dissonant triad like a combination of E major and minor. And then when the melody shifts to F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, left hand's pitch C and E flat combines as a triad of A flat major. This seems a sonority that Liebermann aims throughout this movement. In the section B, the alternating accompaniments keep going in C sharp minor and C sharp major. Like this. But melody changes to singular melody in C sharp major and minor. In the section B, after 2 measures, D major melody line meets D major and D minor, accompanying thirds, which is a type of the multi-tonal combination of the parallel keys. This combination occurs in measure 20, like G major and minor. Let's list it then. From measure 22, the chordal phrases quite randomly progress, which are accompanied by repeating pitch D ostinato. The first chord of the section C starts pitch F and A, but when the ostinato starts, it immediately sounds like D minor. This effect is quite similar to the very first accompaniment of section A, which makes multitonal feeling. Therefore, the pitch D ostinato decides tonal quality from measure 22 to measure 30. This top melody phrase is generated by chromaticism and variable interval shifts like this order, as seen in blue circle. In the section A prime section, the first multitonal phrase repeats shortly and ends with A flat major triad. This slow movement mostly avoids downbeat stress by the syncopations throughout the piece, so that Liebermann seems to bring ambiguous sound from impressionism. A melody line keeps avoiding downbeat up to measure 15, which is the highest range of this piece. Also in the section C, the syncopation made by pitchy D's ostinato stretches throughout measure 22 to 36. This ostinato pattern reminds of the rhythm of Ravel's Le Gibet, which is also syncopation throughout the work. This rhythm resembles impressionistic ambiguity with coloring sonority. Let's move on to the third movement. This third movement obviously distinguishes melody and accompaniment. Through the whole piece, alternating 16th arpeggios accompany single melodic lines, which is a mixture of F sharp major and A sharp minor, which predominantly sounds like F sharp major tonality. After the two measures introduction, stepwise melodic lines begin from measure 3. The harmony of the first tune seems to be in F sharp major in measure 3 to 4. From measure 5, the melody immediately arrives to pitch A, which is the fifth pitch in D major and minor keys. In measure 5, B flat as pivot plays a role to close the first theme. Also, the first part of the first tune, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, is a segment of octatonic 2, which moves to a segment of octatonic 0 in measure 5 to 6. The second melodic phrase is again in octatonic 2. A sharp, B, C sharp, D, C sharp, G, G sharp, C flat, B flat. This phrase transitions to the next chromatic melody of measure 10 to 14. So, yes. In measure 1 to 11, he fluctuates images of gargoyle through interactions between diatonic, octatonic, and mixtures. So measure 1 to 4, F sharp major plus A sharp minor, and measure 5 to 6, D major and D minor, melody line with B flat and A. According to the thematic ideas, the structure is divided like A, B, A, C, A coda, which is the same as rondo. The ending of this movement states a strongly anchored tonal sense in F sharp major by cadence-like motion. Pedal point C sharp and the last F sharp major chord sound together. This sonority is similar to a 5-1 cadential progression, even though the one pedal marking vaguely allows the ending to sound like clear F sharp major. So we vaguely heard. Thus, Liebermann utilized multitonal sense throughout this movement, which moves away from atonal sonority of serialism. In the third gargoyle, the rhythmic feature is traditional idiom. The restless 16th passage recalls Liszt's Grande Etudes, Paganini No. 4, and Debussy Firework from the Prelude Book 2. The two pieces basically have restless 16th passages throughout the works. This 16th passage gives a third gargoyle's etude-like feeling, like Liszt's etude. The time signature of the fourth gargoyle is 12/8. Restless eighth notes continue from the beginning to the end, so this movement is the most etude-like piece in the gargoyles. The sets of the eighth notes are reminiscent of traditional tarantella rhythm. The tonal concept of section A is generated by a combination of diverse interval motifs. Section A begins with left hand motivic sets, which are based on the pitch relationship of minor second plus minor third, or vice versa. The left hand ostinato figures have 4 pitch sets. The pitch sets produce mysterious sonority because the first 4 pitches, B, A sharp, C sharp, D is a fragment of octatonic 2. And the combination of sets contains multitonal sense G major, B minor, E flat major. Also, the right hand passage consists of fragment of G major and minor. In the second measure, the outer melody line of each motif goes through B, D, C sharp, C in a chromatic fragment. And the interval relationship is in minor third, minor second, minor second. In measure 4 to 5, half step and whole step of the beginning motifs shift up to the third interval expansions. This progression sounds like the mixing of tonal feeling because the second and third sonorities are fragments of triads. And melody mostly moves through half steps. When it is closer to section B, the intervals of the melody shift gradually expand from half step up to perfect fourth. From measure 7 to 8, the melody of the half step moves to minor third, and in measure 11 to 14, the melody of the major third expands to perfect fourth. Liebermann did not contribute the intervals to functional tonality. Rather, he expands from smaller intervals to the larger, which makes this movement atonal. This is quite similar to Ernest Bloch's piano sonata, which has systematic interval ratio 5 to 4, 4 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. Even though it may seem that Liebermann does not exactly follow this, he established his logic in the interval ratio. While the passage of the internal expansion continues, measure 11 starts multitonal chords, which mixes two harmonic passages as C major plus D flat major. This passage is a starting point that a newly multitonal passage appears away from the earlier progressions by interval ratio. Section B opens with a full chord in C major, and ostinato bass C seems to mean an anchored C major. However, it actually sounds like atonality because shifting up and down in interval ratio like minor second and minor third breaks the tonal function of C major. In measure 27 to 31, Liebermann blends the three features of this movement, such as the multitonal sense, chromaticism, and variable interval ratio. The bass line ascends through chromaticism, but the basses belong to the triads of the arpeggio. In the right-hand passage, outer and inner voices proceed between minor second and major sixth, according to variable interval ratios. In the section C, the interval ratio expands over the perfect eighth, whereas previously used interval ratios have been less than perfect eighth, when were mostly shifting within tritone intervals. In measure 39 to 42, single melodic gesture in the octaves enlarges from minor 9 to augmented 19. In measure 83 to 85, the dominant seventh full chord in D major repeatedly appears 4 times among the multitonal passage, which is the first appearance of the Gargoyles. These dominant 7 chords seem in E major to be intentional in order to create a cadential feeling, even though unison pitch A ends this movement. At the end of the coda, Liebermann mostly relies on the multitonal technique: F sharp major, C major, D major, E flat major, unison A. In conclusion, in an interview, Lowell Liebermann said that he has been influenced by such composers Bach, Beethoven, Bartok, Liszt, Busoni, Frank Martin Fauré, and Shostakovich. As we have seen, Liebermann's Gargoyles contain various traditional ideas, but they also combine with new idiomatic features. Traditional features are utilized in many places. This does not mean that the traditional characteristics have traditional tonal functions, but his new applications of tradition create new results. The new results are related to the image of gargoyles. The architecture of the gargoyles applies to form musical structures and variable linear melodies in his neotonality. In his structural system, the 4 gargoyles have form structures, and they mostly are built in the rondo style or are in ternary. They all obviously have thematic ideas. Phrasal progressions are balanced between the linear and angular. His lyrical melodic constructions have traditional aspects that he borrowed colorful lyricism from Romantic or Impressionist works. The four movements are atonal. This is because the pieces do not have functional tonality in general, or nor any solid tonal center. However, Liebermann presents several anchored feelings of tonality. So this atonal music contains some tonal feeling. The first movement shows many A minor bass notes, and second movement ends in A flat major's first inversion chord. The third movement starts and ends in F sharp major, and at the end there is a slight cadential feeling of 5-1 in F sharp major. The fourth movement contains three main anchored tonal scents in B minor, C major, and A minor. As he said that he wanted to compose the Gargoyles like Lisztian bombastic pieces. The influence of Liszt especially appears much in the first and fourth movements. In these, Liebermann composed restless, challenging passages which remind of the turbulent rhythms of rapid scales and octaves frequently used by Liszt. Also, in the third movement, he put canonic phrases at the end, which is a main tradition of Baroque styles. Ostinato patterns and polyphonic themes are frequently used throughout the works. The basso continuo patterns are found in the fourth movement. These features recall neo-classical concepts. He confessed that late Shostakovich is who has the most influence on his musical language. In compositional styles of Gargoyles, he followed Shostakovich. This influence would seem to be manifested in the shifting tonalities and pitch sets. This is also seen in the combination of formal structure and pure sonority with melodic lines, although their sounds are dissimilar. Also, there are compositional elements which were brought from typical Shostakovich, such as coexistence of major and minor, modal scales, and constant tonal shifts. As the title Gargoyles implies, Liebermann used the images of gargoyles to produce impressionistic sounds. Tonal ambiguity and unstable melodic direction were brought from Impressionism. The Gargoyles resembles Robert Gaspar in many aspects. The second Gargoyles repeats ambiguously syncopated ostinato rhythms, and the third Gargoyle presents like pictorial sounds, which is similar to Ondine of Ravel. There was a relationship between Ondine and third Gargoyle because both are related to water, in that architecture gargoyles are made for spouting rainwater in the wall of the buildings. Even though he drew the images of sounds from the influence of Impressionism, his compositional material is totally different from it. According to his desire to be called neo-tonalist, but not to be called neo-impressionist, his material of his musical language is produced by multitonal senses, interval ratio generations, and imagery figuration of gargoyles. His musical language is different from Impressionism, but the developmental process is quite similar to Impressionism. This is the reason that critics debate to define his compositional styles between neo-tonality and neo-impressionism. Among his contributions to neo-tonality, the clever combinations of trios potentially describe grotesque octatonic sounds. Randomly modulating tonal passages remind of irregular shapes of gargoyles. Interval ratio generation style is his logic. He categorized groups of intervals according to ratios. Narrower interval passages frequently expand to the wider. The logic is in terms of interval expansion and contraction, without tonal function. This interval ratio generation integrates octatonic and chromatic scale, because these are used as a part of narrower intervals. This proves that architecture gargoyles' variable characteristics applied to his gargoyles to create pictorial sounds through his neo-tonality. This is what this study defined his neo-tonality. This study has focused on musical language of Liebermann's gargoyles. There are difficulties of study because there are only few references about the gargoyles due to its short history. Extant references rarely research and analyze his neotonal musical language. However, it is found that his neotonal technique and imaginal development creates a new idiomatic pianism under the base of multitonal material of tradition. These programmatic gargoyles succeed in balancing in the structural body of the four movements as a neat set and to harmonize traditional musicality and neotonality. These contributions have enabled the Liebermann's gargoyles to become an attractive work in contemporary repertoire. So now it's time for me to play these challenging etude-like pieces. give special thanks to all committee and all commerce here, and thanks to Professor Antokolets and academic supervisor and performance supervisor, Mr. Professor Gregory Allen, and Professor David Renner, Professor Sophia Gimson, and Professor Tom O'Hare, and Professor Luisa Nardini. She already left. Yeah. So thank you for all for coming. My lecture itself. Thank you.